I think that sharing this information as quickly and as early as we can is vital, because at this point, women's health often just kind of falls off a cliff after the mid 30s or after fertility. So I think that we owe ourselves that to keep that timeline going, because otherwise, what are we doing? We're just saying, like, you're not really relevant anymore.
Hello, and welcome back to the show. We have a not to be missed episode for you today. Today, my guest is Tamsen Fadal. She is an award-winning journalist, a best-selling author. As a quick background, Tamsen spent 30 years as a news anchor. She has been on this show before. Tamsen's back to talk about a new documentary she has coming out, a new book, as well as a study that we jointly did. So let's start with the book. The book is called How to Menopause, and it is coming out early next year. We are going to get a sneak peek into that. We are also talking about her documentary, The M Factor, Shredding the Silence on Menopause. And that is actually premiering on PBS in October of this year. So you'll get a chance to see that. She interviews world-renowned experts on menopause, and they talk about perimenopause, menopause, and the symptoms so that we can all get much more educated about this element of women's lives that could start in your 30s and can go into your 60s. We also talk about a joint study that Tamsen did with She Speaks, and we had close to 4,000 women from across the country take the study. And in that study, we learned more from the people who participated about their menopause symptoms, their perimenopause symptoms, the impact on their life, on their personal lives, on their relationships, and on work. Very highly encourage you to check out Tamsen on social media. She has over 1 million followers on Instagram. She's also on TikTok. She's really just changed the way that I think about menopause. And I know she's changing the way that hundreds of thousands and soon to be millions of people think about menopause. She actually was on this show before when she was still a news anchor, but we talk about all of the things I just mentioned. If you or a woman you know is experiencing menopause or perimenopause, you think you might be experiencing that, this is an episode you will want to listen to. So with that, I'm going to let you hear my conversation with Tamsen. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We've done this before, but you have a really important new thing that you are working on, one that we've had a chance to collaborate a little bit on this work that you're doing. Yeah. But yeah. I want to just give people a sense for who you are and your career, because you've had these different parts of your career and each has been successful in its own right. That's an accomplishment, like having multiple things that you've done. Can you tell us a little bit about your career that's kind of brought you to this point so people get a sense for who you are?
I started in news. Every time I say 30 years ago, I'm like, wait, is that right? About 30 years ago, right out of college, I was in radio for a year, and then I moved into television news, local news. And I traveled around the country and then eventually around the world, working for local stations as well as some of the affiliate networks. And I ended up in New York about 15 plus years ago. And so I delivered news to New York. I put New Yorkers to sleep every night, literally, for about 15 years on the evening news. And so it was one of those things that you go, oh, wow, okay, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years. So it was a long time, but it was a career that feels like it went by in a blink now that I look at it. And I really loved every day of it, every year of it, every city I was in. I love storytelling. I like interviewing people. I think you know that is a passion of mine. I like how stories impact the world, how they make change, what they do to us, how they speak to us. And so I loved my career for a long time. And then the last few years, I started looking into a different story that affects about a billion women or so. And it really became a big part of my life and a big part of my message.
The content you started creating on social media was around menopause. And what where did you start with it? How has it grown? Because it's incredibly impressive how many people you speak to in this community you've grown, and the engagement you have with that community. And I saw this firsthand when we did our joint survey. But talk a little bit about how you started creating the content around menopause, why you started creating it, and then how it just kind of took off.
Yeah, absolutely. I was always kind of fascinated with age as we were getting older. I was always looking at like, now what? Now what do you do? All these people that were making these incredible pivots and they'd have this career and go to that career. And I was always fascinated that the older people got, the more peaceful they kind of got with their lives. And it just felt like they had control, like their hands on the ring. And so I was always looking at that and I was interested in that. And then I was interested about like advice that I would give myself if I were younger, like the things I wish I knew. I wish I knew that when I was 25, when I was trying to negotiate a job, or I wish I knew that when I was 30. What was I thinking? So I started doing a little bit of that content and just talking through it because I thought that was interesting. All the different generations that are on social media, right? On one feed, you'll have a 20-year-old, a 32-year-old, a 55-year-old, a 72-year-old. And I always thought that's interesting that we're all exchanging information. And then I had an incident at the television station one night in the studio during a live broadcast. We were on a commercial break, and it was this kind of epic hot flash / heart racing out of control / probably panic attack. Now that I understand it, look back, I'm like, am I having a heart attack? Like I couldn't even catch my breath. So from that moment on, went to a doctor, figured out, got a message in my patient portal that said, you're in menopause, any questions? Like 4 words. And I'm like, menopause? I'm too young for menopause. I'm 49. Well, lo and behold, that was smack dab exactly when you really kind of fall into that. And so I started just doing some of my own research. I lost my mother at an early age. I didn't know what I could and couldn't do in terms of treatment options, solutions, what was out there, what was available. And I started doing interviews with different people, just kind of quietly, not a big deal, but just before I would go to work, actually, before I'd go do the other interviews, I was doing these. And then one day I learned that there are 34 plus symptoms of menopause. And I went on TikTok and I read them off. And the response I got back was enormous of women like, oh my gosh, that's happened to me. I have burning tongue. I have an itchy skin. I have hot flash. And I was like, what? And so that's sort of where it began. And I eventually moved over to Instagram, and I'm on both now, sharing that information. And I'll just say that the response of the community is the reason we are where we are today. Like if I hadn't seen that kind of response or known that anybody wanted to have that conversation, I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you about it. I truly, truly believe that women have wanted to have these conversations. They've been there wanting to have these conversations. None of us knew we needed to have. Some didn't know we needed to have them, where to start, and how to not feel self-conscious and shame with it. And I think that that's the most important thing. Like we have to own the fact that it's not okay to feel isolated and shameful about this time in life, that our health concerns really, really matter, that it affects half of the workforce. And we need to talk about this younger, not when we're 50 years old, but when we're 25 years old. So we understand what's going on and it doesn't feel like this unbelievable thing all of a sudden that it becomes part of our life transition.
I'll give you just one example. There's so many more people talking about menopause, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's still not accepted in all places. It's harder in workplace environments for women to acknowledge this. There's definitely still kind of an ageism element, I think, that's
100%.
associated.
And we don't want that to work against us either. That's
Right.
really important. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but, I saw somebody posting about how, how important it is when you're or how much bone density, for example, you lose during the perimenopause, menopause time frame, and how you should be doing like lifting weights way before you're kind of in the thick of it, as an example. And I thought, women need to know this information, and not just women when they're in it, but before it. So when you think about the audience for the message, who is the audience in terms of age range for messaging around menopause and the impacts of menopause in terms of your health and your body?
That's a good question. I mean, I do think it starts in the 30s. I think we have to have that conversation starting in the 30s. I think that we can't put this into silos. And there's a couple of reasons for it. Uh, First, because part of the solutions is a whole body solution that we need to have. It's not just going to the doctor's office, get my hormones, and that's the end of it. You can do that, and that will definitely help. There's no question about it. If that's what you decide to do and that's the path you decide to take. And that, that's what I have. I'm on hormones, but my lifestyle all around it has changed too. How I work out, how I sleep, how I pay attention to things, how I do my actual work now. All of those things take part. The stress levels I have, how much time I'm spending taking care of myself, not thinking taking care of myself is a luxury. So I say in your early to mid 30s is when that conversation definitely has to start, because you want to be as strong as possible. You want to be we say in the prime of your life, you want to be in the prime of your life, during the prime of your life. There's no question about that to me.
So you have a book that you can now pre-order, and we'll make sure to have a link to it in the show notes. And the book is people can pre-order the book. It's called How to Menopause, and that is coming out in 2025, but you can pre-order it now. You also have a documentary that is coming out sooner that people can catch. And the documentary is called The M Factor, Shredding the Silence on Menopause. Can you talk about what is the message in the documentary that's coming out? And it's coming out October 18th or 17th?
October 17th. Right.
October 17th.
Yep.
And then what is the message in the book, and who is it for?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because both of those things were kind of happening at the same time. And I said, wow, we've got like a lot of these doctors. We've got a lot of information. We've got a lot of stuff that we have to cover. So I'll talk about the documentary first. The documentary has been almost 3-year now process of, talking to women, talking to doctors, making sure we hit all the aspects of menopause, making sure that women know it is not a one size fits all solution, making sure they understand sex, making sure they understand solutions, hormonal, non-hormonal, making sure we talk about the workplace, because that is a big conversation. There's no question about that. Making sure we understand brain health and how it affects us in the workplace, affects us in life. What happens when we're in menopause versus postmenopausal, which is the rest of our lives after you hit it. It was really important to me that we educate women. Women are really smart. They want the information. They want to know what to say to their doctors. They want to have a way to say, listen, I watched this film. I heard a doctor say, this is the thing I should be asking you, and this is what I want. And so that was very important for us in the documentary, and understanding how to have that as the tone. PBS is our partner in that, and PBS is where it's going to be aired. PBS.org. It starts on the 17th, and then you can check local listings all around the country, depending on the city. And more cities are signing up, and more people are signing up for hostings, which is real exciting. And so communities what we're also doing is licensing out the doc for free, but so that different communities can take it and show it in their community. So we have, one doctor in Washington State that is going to get a theater and bring everybody together to the theater to sit and watch it together one afternoon. So I am so excited by that, because we want to make sure that people have access to it. They can get their hands on it. They have access to it, that there's no barrier to entry, right? When it comes to that, they have to be able to have that information. Yeah. So that's the first part. The book came about, and that's been probably just as long of a process, but writing is been my jam for a long time. I love it. But it was really important to me that people didn't feel like the information was difficult to digest, hard to understand. And so for me, I kept saying, this is an expert-driven, girlfriend-approved guide to menopause. Like, I want to make sure this is that menopause manual that cuts through all of that chaos, so you can take back control of your life. Because I feel like we feel as though we lose control, we lose our confidence, we lose our understanding of what is happening to ourselves mentally and physically. And I wanted to make sure that it was understandable, not just what happens in the doctor's office, but happens in the bedroom, the boardroom, beyond. And so it has a lot of different parts of your lifestyle. I don't believe that menopause just is here. I believe it impacts all parts of your life. It impacts your dating life if you're dating, your relationships. It impacts whether what you're going to wear that day, what you're going to eat that night. It impacts a lot of things. And I think it also gives us a pause to take a look at where we are in our life. And I wanted to address all those things in the book, and not just leave it in a medical sense, because I think it's so much more than that.
So starting with the documentary first, for people who are interested in learning more about menopause, the documentary will help give people an understanding of here's what you should be going and asking your doctor about.
Yes.
There's no one size fits all in terms of the solution, right? I mean, I feel like the second you ask a group of women about menopause
Yeah.
and A, their experience with it, B, the solutions they're deciding
Yeah.
to pursue. So if I watch the documentary, I will be able to get a better I'll walk away with a better understanding of, yes, this is a personalized journey.
Mhm.
Everyone's going to have their own experience. Here's what you should be asking your doctor. Here are the kinds of things you should be
Mhm.
thinking about. Here is, so it's almost like a great way to prep you, whether you're in
Yep.
perimenopause or you're in menopause, which I know, not everyone knows exactly where they are.
Yes.
Just for that reason alone, that people don't even know where they are in the journey.
That's the whole point, is that, we started it out with some different voices so women could be like, okay, that's me, that's me, that's me. We talked to real women in the documentary. We even talked to Audra McDonald in the documentary. She is a Broadway star who had put a very raw and emotional post up on Instagram about a year and a half ago. And we reached out to her, and she was so gracious with her time to talk to us. So we wanted to make sure that people understand that this is, this happens to everyone. And then I think what was important with the documentary is that because there's such a lack of education and such a feeling that I don't know what to do, I don't know what it is, and I don't know what to do, that we have to go back to the basics. We can't assume that everybody knows. Like, we say the word menopause, but what does it really mean? What does it do to your sex life? What do you do if there's painful sex? What does it do to your mind? Why am I feeling depressed all the time? We interviewed Dr. Lisa Mosconi, a neuroscientist who does a lot of the research on women's brains, and understanding how estrogen plays a part, understanding how lifestyle plays a part, understanding how race plays a part, in how women are treated. And so it was very, we have a historian that we've interviewed for the documentary to take a look back as well, to understand why there's such a lack of information, and to understand a doctor's not going to know everything, because doctors weren't necessarily trained on this oftentimes. And so that was important for us to hit all of those points, so at least women know that we have to work on several different fronts to make sure that we get these answers and we own the conversation and change the narrative.
I really think it's a service to women, because there isn't a lot of, or historically, there's not a lot of information about this.
Mm.
I know that I have talked to my mom's generation, and, just listening to their perspectives. There was, I guess, some study that came out during the time when her generation was going
Yeah.
through menopause, that basically told them, for example, hormone replacement therapy will give you cancer.
Mhm.
Like, it was a study. So you have a whole generation of women
Several.
who were told that hormone replacement therapy will give you cancer, because this was like, some study that was done. So now you have people like of a younger generation saying, "Oh, what was your experience? What do you know? Like, what do you think about it's so interesting. If you ask women, I think, of that generation, they have it in their minds
Yeah.
that hormone, I'm just giving an example, right?
You
That
know, but women of our generation have that too, because we've been hearing that.
Yep.
So it has definitely trickled down. That was the 2002 Women's Health Initiative, and that study wasn't really even to study that. And it's interesting, the study scared women. It caused a panic. I've talked to doctors that remember that day so well, and they described that in the documentary. People were calling their office saying, like, what did you give me? 40% of women that were menopause were on hormone therapy at the time. It went down to 4%. And so when we look at, like, that is a single study that changed so much, and it speaks to where we are today. And it also speaks to why we don't have the education, why we don't have advances, why we don't have the research dollars, why doctors aren't being trained about this in medical school, and why women are confused. I was talking to somebody earlier today in our Facebook group. We have a midlife Facebook group, and she said, I went into my doctor's office and I asked 3 different times if I could take hormone therapy. And they said, no, they don't feel comfortable with giving it to me. this is a doctor that you trust, that you go into. They're not educated on it either oftentimes. So it's really important to find somebody who is has studied and understands menopause, understands hormone therapy, feels comfortable talking about it, isn't afraid to get new information and look up new information, and is not saying like, no, 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 that's not it. Suck it up. This is just a normal thing in life. And so I think that all those things got me very enraged when I heard about them initially, because I've done a lot of stories and I've covered a lot of different things, and nothing has quite affected me like this in terms of seeing what needs to be done and figuring out a way that that I can contribute my voice to the conversation.
Well, and misinformation is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure that you cover this too, but is there a sufficient amount of research being done for in menopause as it relates? Because so many women, well, over half the population will go through this at some point,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Is it getting the attention it deserves? So how do you think the conversation is changing? And do you see it changing?
I think it's changing. I think, look, there's a lot of work to be done. We're talking about a billion women in menopause by 2025 globally. We're talking about, in addition
Wow.
to all these women, all the men that need to be part of the conversation. We're talking about not only talking to the women, but now going back and educating the doctors and making sure that, the people that control the purse strings understand what we need in terms of research. So I think that, yes, we are hearing the conversation. If you're on Instagram or you're on Facebook or you're seeing some of the headlines, it's definitely out there. But do I think that everybody has all the accurate information? Absolutely not, because I think that it's changing every day. One, two, to your point, to correct the misinformation and for how long that was going on, 20 plus years, we have a lot of, cleanup. We have a lot of, of damage to
Yeah.
fix. But it had to start somewhere, right? And so we're here today. And what I've seen evolve in the past 3 to 4 years since I started talking about this has been incredible. It's beautiful. I was in the dentist office the other day, and the dentist said, "Oh, that could be menopause." And I was like, "What?" "Oh, yes. I'm so glad you know that." So
Really?
sure, that that's part of the documentary too, is that there are dental issues that come during this time. Estrogen impacts all parts of your body. And that's just the other thing. It's not just getting rid of, dealing with, getting by the symptoms of today. It's future proofing your body for tomorrow, because there are different things that happen during menopause that can impact brain health, heart health, bone health. And those are the three things where we find most of the big issues, right? As we continue to get older, those are the big things that we worry about. And so I think that sharing this information as quickly and as early as we can is vital. So when we say how early, I don't know. While we're learning about puberty, we should probably also learn about the other side of this, which is that second puberty people talk about. Because at this point, women's health often just kind of falls off a cliff after the mid 30s or after their,
Mhm.
fertility. And so I think that we owe ourselves that, to keep that timeline going, because otherwise, what are we doing? We're just saying like, you're not really relevant anymore.
Right. Well, and we're living longer lives, right? On average, we're living longer lives. Let's live them to the best of our
Yes.
ability from a
Let's not
health
suffer.
standpoint.
Let's
Yeah.
not let's not suffer through it all.
And when you just said that you talked about three things that are three key areas, the brain, the heart, and your bone health.
Mhm.
So skeletal, like this, like
Skeletal
the,
osteoporosis is one of the biggest fears and concerns out there. You see, and this is what I think about often. I came from an 80s child, and it was like, get skinny, lose weight, watch your calories, don't eat too much, don't have fats. Well, now it's eat fats, eat for your body, don't worry about calories, make sure that you're feeding your body the right way and with the right things. And you're looking at your microbiome, and you're making sure that you don't have inflammation, and you're working out to be stronger, and you eat a lot of protein and fiber. We didn't talk about protein and fiber when I was in my 20s. I mean, it wasn't a thing. It was eat less fat, eat less calories. So, we're learning more. And I think that that's really an important part of it all, because those all play into heart, brain, and bone.
So the conversation, and just by virtue of the fact that you've got the documentary coming out in conjunction with PBS, so people will get a chance to watch this.
Yeah.
You have the book coming out, and with I think a great publisher, so you have a great opportunity to get this book in front of so many people who need it. I mean, you just mentioned that 1 billion women globally by next year, like
Yeah.
2025. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, I
It
would
really
not
is.
have assumed it was that
Yeah.
high.
Yeah.
And so there's a need for this. There's going to be conversation, hopefully, that's changing. What about the workplace? How are corporations? I mean, I started my career at a big company,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a lot of female leaders and mentors who I saw probably going through, this stage of their
Sure.
life. I
Sure.
don't think I ever remember hearing a peep about this from an
No,
employee handbook standpoint.
never.
I
Well,
don't, it
you'd be
wasn't
hard
in.
pressed to find it now. The Menopause Society just released some information, and they oversee a lot of different parts of this, and doctors that are menopause certified, but talking about the workplace and talking about how to help employers, because it's very confusing. I went into my workplace, a media company, over 200 television stations, right before I left, and I said, like, I think we need a menopause policy. What did that mean? They were like, well, tell us what it is. And and they were really like working with me to figure out what it is,
Mhm.
because it hasn't really been a thing. Now, the UK has been incredible about being so advanced in terms of understanding how to implement this in the workplace. Channel 4 there in particular. I think that here in the US, it's company to company. It's going to be who's in the lead there at that company to bring that conversation to the forefront. And I think that's going to be really important. I think we're going to see this needle move quickly. I don't think we've seen it do that yet. I wrote an op-ed for Harvard Business Review about maybe a year ago, maybe less than that. And we were hard pressed to try to find some companies that were, some did, but willing to talk about it, explain it, tell us how the policy worked. The few companies that stepped up, we were so grateful for. But there's two things that we want out of it. We don't want it to hurt women. We don't want it to hurt women being advanced. We don't want it to hurt women in the workplace. We do want women, though, to be understood in the workplace, because women oftentimes at this point in life go into work, have these kind of symptoms, don't feel confident, depending on what the symptoms are, feel like it's impacting their life, feel like they're worried about getting a promotion, sometimes leave the workplace altogether as a result of not necessarily understanding what's going on with their body or not being able to deal with it. So we want to get to a place that we're helping these women stay in the workplace, be productive in the workplace, feel better in the workplace. Otherwise, I think, we hurt ourselves as a whole. And with half of the workforce in this age, or going to be in this age, it's really, really important.
Yeah. Well, and since the age range is so broad,
So,
you have so many, you
yep.
likely have employees who
Mhm.
are who are going through this at some
Yep.
stage.
Yep.
So just quickly, we did a study together. We did a joint study. I mentioned earlier that I was so impressed with the engagement in your community of people who follow you and are very plugged into your message. So we had so many of those women take the survey, and we had some great insights and some
Yeah.
great findings. Is there anything in particular that you found that was like a strong takeaway? We had, I think, 3,000 plus women who took the
Yeah.
survey. What was a maybe interesting insight for you from that study?
I always love relationships, whether we're talking about personal love relationships, work relationships, friendships. I think a couple of different things. I think one, the need for community, which I think speaks to exactly why we're seeing this kind of engagement online and why women are talking about it and why they're sharing. And the fact that they need a support group and they need help with that, and they want to share and they want to have somebody who listens, because a lot of them feel very isolated. So community is a big part of that conversation. I think the other part, and this was a part I was really kind of honing in on and focused on. And I know when you and I originally set out to do this, I'm so grateful for you for it, because I think it's another way women feel like they're being heard and they have a voice in the conversation. But the negative impact on the quality of intimate relationships and support from their partners is something that, we have yet to really dive into. But it is something that the survey found. And I think it's something that is going to need more conversation. We've got to get through helping women, in this area first, because they've got to feel better before anything else. But to be able to have that kind of support in intimate relationships and talking about men in this conversation has got to happen next.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because yes, while half the population is going to go through this very personally because it's
Yeah.
part of the circle of what a woman
Yes.
goes through, the other half the population will have some impact. They will have
Right.
a mother, a
Right.
sister, a
Right.
significant other, a friend who is going through this. And to the
Yep.
point you made earlier about three key areas that it impacts: the brain, the heart, the
Yeah.
bone structure,
Yeah.
the skeletal. That is pretty much who we are as human
Mhm.
beings. I mean, it
Yeah. It is who
impacts
we are.
everything.
It,
So
it im-
having education for men too, I think is so critical. Well, Tamsen, I am so grateful that
oh, I'm
you
so great.
are
Thank you.
doing
Really.
this. It is a service, as I said, it's a service to women. It's a service to the people who love women, right? Because
Exactly
even
right.
if it's not
Right.
a woman yourself going through this, you love someone who probably is going through this. There's somebody in your life you care about going through this. So we will make sure to have a way for people to find the documentary, to
Wonderful.
find the book. If people want to follow you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Sure, Tamsen Fadal on all handles, and we have a lot of free resources if people need them too. Just symptom trackers, things to walk into your doctor with, making sure we help you with diet and exercise and wellness and food and nutrition and whatever it is you're looking for. I think a lot of those things change during this time. Like my understanding of food and all that's changed. So anyway, I put anything up there that I think about, and so if it's helpful to you, let me know. And yeah, I'm so appreciative. Your questions are always so thoughtful, and thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening. If you're an influencer or a brand that wants to work with us, please feel free to email us at info@shespeaks.com. Until next time.